Welcome to episode 2 of NUFC Matters. I'm Steve Wraith.
And I'm Malcolm MacDonald, and I have a big apology to make, Steve. On the bus coming here, my white stripes fell off my shirt. I do apologise, everyone.
It's good to have you back, Mal. Obviously, last week I was going alone, but
Yes,
I made that
and
prediction.
you did very well, I have to say.
Well, thank you. I made that prediction last week. I had a feeling that you would have gone for a draw, and subsequently we did our talking and filthies pre-match, and you did predict a draw. I went for a narrow defeat, and I was right. What did you make of the game?
Well, do you know, I thought in the first half, Newcastle played really well. We knew that Arsenal, they're a great possession side, and so they're going to have the bulk of the possession, whether they're playing home or away. And that's precisely what happened. But when Newcastle did get the ball, and I was impressed with Newcastle in the way that they actually organised themselves to take that possession away from Arsenal and then turn it into attack. And the first half, I thought they're going really well, this side. And Arsenal, in playing, they never had a single shot at goal in the first half. They didn't have an effort. Dubravka never had a shot to save. And he was doing terrific on any crosses that were coming in and corner kicks and stuff. And so Newcastle, once they started getting forward, in the whole of the half, I saw 4 opportunities that they could have scored. And certainly Joe Linton, that was the best chance of all, and he hit the keeper with it. And what I would say is, these days in the Premiership, when you get a chance like that, one-on-one with a keeper, you've got to stick it into the corners. And I think that's something that Joe Linton has got to learn. There's a lot of lessons that other players can learn as well. But overall, that first 45, I was quite impressed. And I looked at the back 4, and they seemed to be coping very well with Arsenal. And Arsenal were tricky. The interpassing and absolutely fabulous. But the back 4 seemed to be coping with it. And the fullbacks were prepared to get forward. The midfield was okay. John Joe Shelvey, he wasn't dropping off as he so often can. And overall, I thought, hey, we've got a real chance here. But when the chances come, you have to stick them away. And that's all that was lacking, I felt, in the first half.
It was the proverbial game of 2 halves, though, because the second half, obviously, substitutions played their part, and lack of midfielders on the bench, bizarrely. What did you make of that?
Well, I couldn't work it out. And where I was early in the game, and I'd sort of been the guest of the day, and I was with Bob Moncur and went round talking in the different rooms prior to the match, and everybody was mentioning this. Have you seen the subs list? And nobody was happy. Everybody was seriously questioning it, that it was that it wasn't a balanced bench at all. And yet, here with Newcastle playing at home, it wasn't as if they had only taken a limited number away from home, and so they had to make do.
Lascelles was reportedly ill on the morning. Dummett obviously was, not 100%, so obviously there was a concern over him. But Key was fully fit and wasn't even selected in the squad. So, I mean, you've managed the top level before. Is that something you would have done?
No, you're trying to balance the whole thing out. And you have to be prepared for all emergencies, all contingencies, and I just found it quite bizarre. And there's got to be a reason why Key wasn't on the bench, a reason that none of us are being told as yet, because it's the kind of decision by a manager that has people seriously questioning him if there was no valid reason for him not to do it, and of course, the person who suffers most by it is him, Steve Bruce, because it limits his options once he's seen the whole thing being performed in front of him. He's then, it comes a time, whether it be injury or somebody's a bit knackered, which I think happened with Sean Longstaff, that he had been, he hadn't had a full pre-season, and of course injury comes along. So you've got to be ready from your subs bench and in your head as to what's going to happen, what you're going to do, how you're going to change it, and it's got to be done like that. And I just think Steve limited his options, and people noticed. You know, the one thing, and he should know this, being born in Chestnut Street, for heaven's sake.
Oh, I didn't realise he's from the North East. He's never mentioned it.
He has. He has just once or twice. Oh, I know. But he knows up here and the people as well as anybody at all in football, and so he knows that there's canny thinking going on all the while, and that people, they can see what's right and what's wrong, and as soon as they saw the team sheet, they just went, "Whoa, there's something wrong on that bench."
And it came back to bite him on the backside, because
it did.
Longstaff goes off. You know, that was obviously something which Steve Bruce decided wasn't working. Longstaff hadn't quite hit the ground running. He's coming back from an injury, to be fair. Shelvey obviously goes off injured, so we bring Willems on, who's brought, we're led to believe in, as a defender, and we had that crazy 2 minutes where he came onto the pitch and didn't seem to know where he was playing, and Steve Bruce seemed to have lost complete control of what was going on the pitch. Obviously, since then, there's been a rather bizarre Twitter spat between Craig Hope from the Daily Mail and Alex Bruce, Steve Bruce's son, where Craig was reporting on what he felt he'd heard Steve Bruce say. It's like amateur night.
Yes, it is, and I've been a manager myself, and if one of my kids started to get involved with a journalist or spectators, or fans or whatever, I would say stop it now. Don't get involved. This is my job, and it's not an easy job. So you butt out. It's one of those kind of things that it doesn't stop there and then, that it will smoulder away and it will start to repeat itself, and any good journalist will stoke the flames of that one just to keep igniting it, and it all makes for good copy. There's only one loser on that, and that's the Bruce family, I'm afraid.
The switch with Willems, obviously, once he had got himself sorted, it was too little, too late, and the goal came through his mistake.
Right, back to it was balmy what we all witnessed from the guy running across the pitch and sort of taking up a non-position and looking around as if he didn't quite know whether to go back or forward or whatever. And Steve Bruce was trying to get it sorted. Unfortunately, it was 70 yards away, right on the far side, and so his voice isn't going to carry there, his instruction isn't going to make it, and I don't know whether there was a language problem there on the touchline before the fellow went on. There may well have been, but he didn't know what he was doing. But then Steve Bruce later, he said, well, we got that sorted out, and then he didn't know where to play. But it was then, when he did know where to play, when it was sorted out, where the horrendous error made. And when I say horrendous, I mean this is a schoolboy error. In this country, I can't say for where Willems has grown up, but I would think that he's been taught this well because youngsters get taught exceedingly well in Holland. It's one of the best places for any youngster to be taught the game. One of the golden rules, and there are many that footballers have to learn when they're youngsters, and you take them with you, and you must never ever break any of them. And one of them is when there's a fairly longish ball coming to you, particularly in midfield or at the back, and this pass, it was over 30 yards. I think Steve Bruce's son said it was a 10-yard pass. It wasn't. It was much longer than that. And with a pass that's going nearly half the width of the pitch, the golden rule is you never stand and wait for it, you go to it. If he'd gone to it, then the run that the Arsenal player made to get possession would have been cut off. The fellow would have gone to it, got the ball, and all of a sudden, when you're on the move, things start to open up. It's when you stood still that everything becomes static and you're struggling, and the angles all get smaller and smaller because the opponents are coming at you. And so when you're moving, then things will start to open up and you can start to play, and it gives lots of opportunities to all your teammates. And he broke the golden rule, and so if you watch very carefully, as soon as he doesn't move, all of the back four of Newcastle, they all fell off their toes and went back on their heels and went, oh dear, because they should have been going forward. Now all of a sudden they've got to think about getting back. Because it was just such a schoolboy error that it should never happen, and so it's caught everybody out by surprise. And so all of a sudden the fella, he's got it, he's gone bump 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 over to the eventual goal scorer, and he's one of the best in the game over and I just thought, well, come on, Steve. I mean, this was my immediate thought as I sat and watched all this take place. I thought, why have you bought somebody who doesn't know how to play? That was my immediate thought.
Harsh but fair, I think. But fair.
Somebody who doesn't know, the rules of playing their game, and I don't mean referee rules. I mean professional rules that you never break.
Obviously, early days. And that's the first game. I think statistically as well, it was pretty similar to the game last season. We lost 2-1 against Arsenal. Shots on target, etc. were all fairly similar. Possession even was very similar to Rafa Benitez's result against Arsenal last year. Let's look at off the pitch now. And Lee Charnley in his programme notes chose that particular avenue to have another pop at the departing manager. What did you make of that? I mean, should it not just be forgotten about now? Because ultimately, Rafa's in the history books now with Kevin Keegan, Joe Harvey et al., isn't he?
To start, what I would say to Newcastle United is, why don't you start saying nice things about what's going on rather than something in the past? There's no need to go there. Why go picking on Rafa Benitez? I thought it was in such bad taste. Rafa Benitez, with the side that he had at his disposal, he pulled off miracles. You might not like the way he got his side playing, but heavens, it was effective, really effective. And there's also all sorts of stuff coming out from Newcastle United about a fella who is now on the other side of the world. I just thought it was unnecessary. It was in bad taste. And I'll tell you what, if I was Steve Bruce, new manager, and I looked at that and I would have thought, what the hell are you talking about an X for when I'm the manager? Talk about me, what I'm intending to do, what what we're all going to be doing together. It's a new team.
Accentuate the positive. Talk about the new signings.
Of course,
talk about the
all
new
of that.
season.
Yes, and I just found it utterly bizarre, and that's why. That's why I had this horrible feeling inside of me that Rafa is going to be that ghost that haunts, and that they're never quite going to get rid of him. You know, that there'll be a woo in the corridors, and it'll never let anybody just get on with the job in hand. It was bad taste, but it was completely unnecessary. And to be honest, Lee Chantley, he's not a solid pro at the job that he's got. He's got so much to learn.
And Rafa, of course, he came back with his dignified response, and what he had to say was very sensible. And I think there was also a shrouded message in there that if you want to keep this going, I've got plenty skeletons in the cupboard.
And this world that we live in, when we were born, it was a massive place. Now it's shrunk because in seconds there's the information on the other side of the world.
Yeah.
And so it is so shrunk that as soon as somebody has a go at Rafa Benitez, a journalist is on the phone on Rafa's mobile and saying, "Hey, so-and-so said this about you, da-da-da-da-da. What do you think?"
Talking of technology, Malcolm, we've got obviously interaction now with our viewers on social media, Twitter and Facebook. You can follow us on both of those and send your questions in. We've got some good questions, Mal. We're going to fly through these.
Okay.
So the first one's from David Harrison. He says, "Do we have a stronger team than last year?"
Do you know, that really is a very good question, because when I looked at the team before the ball was kicked on Saturday, I thought, oh dear. But the way they went about the first half, I thought, I can see the makings of quite a good side here, and I must give credit to players like Richie, who Richie is an excellent Championship player, but he's just worked his socks off now. For in all the games that he's played in every moment, he has worked, and I so admire the guy, and I didn't think he could get any better, but he is doing, I think, and just taking him as an example, and of course, if others follow him, great, and I'm seeing lots of improvement coming on. There's one or two kids coming through into it. Longstaff, for one, I know that he suffered. Just on Longstaff, there is one thing I ought to say. I don't think Longstaff and Shelvey can possibly play together.
I'd agree.
They cannot play together whatsoever. It's two people trying to play the same role, and so they're always going to be knocking shoulders together.
Longstaff benefited from the organisation that Rafa brought to that team. What stuck out for me on the game on Saturday was there was very little organisation. Right. And my worry about that is that the back four or back three, whatever Steve Bruce goes with, will suffer. For me, Jamal Lascelles isn't the greatest of defenders, and I think he could end up being left bare, because for all Shelvey was dropping back and covering that back four a lot, which you don't like.
And to add to what you're saying, that the right back just keeps flooding forward, and that leaves Lascelles a little exposed.
And he's not the greatest defender.
He's not the greatest.
He's not confident on the ball.
No.
And there could be issues there.
There
could be issues. So getting back to David's question, just yes or no answer. Is that squad, is that team stronger than last year?
Do you think David would mind if I delay until the end of next month?
Good stuff. Yeah.
Yeah.
Nick,
and I will answer it.
No,
I promise.
We'll come back to your question.
But I just want to see a little bit more.
That's a fair point. Nick on Twitter, he says, "Hi Steve, my dad used to tell me about Supermac's blistering debut for Newcastle." He's talking about your home debut, of course, against Liverpool. Yeah. He says, "Did you ever forgive Ray Clemence for knocking your teeth out?"
Well, Yes, and he knew exactly what he was doing, make no mistake on that one. And the irony is that come the end of that season, I was drafted into the England squad, the full England squad. I'd been in the under-23s up to then. And we went to Ninian Park and beat Wales, and Ray Clements was in the squad, and I'm sat in the lounge at the hotel, and there's Ray Clements, and he's looking at me, and I'm looking at him, and my false teeth were gleaming, and we never really spoke. Mm. But by heavens, we didn't half look at each other a lot. There was this sort of like almost enforced silence between us, and it went on for years. And you know, I still can't remember at any time that he ever spoke to me after that. So
there's your answer, Nick.
Yes, and by the way, his middle name is Assassin.
Oscar Martinez says, how far do you think we'll go in the cups this year? Obviously, Newcastle have been drawn in the second round of the Carabao Cup against Leicester at home. The old Premiership tie.
And we still don't know when it's to be played, do we?
Yeah, Wednesday
they've confirmed.
Yeah, it's the Wednesday night. Yeah, 7:45 at St James's Park.
Right, because I checked on the internet this morning, and
a lot of people talk about boycotting that game now as well, which is a pity. But getting back to Oscar's question, how far do you think we'll go in the cups? Steve Bruce says he's concentrating on the cups this year. He wants to do
quite
well.
Right. And I will be delighted if he sticks the full side out there and says, really go for it. Mm-hmm. So I'd like to see them go for as long a cup run in all competitions as possible. Go for it.
Another question from Steve767 on Twitter. He says, how good a player was Tony Green?
Oh, he was absolutely brilliant, was Greenie. He had this high stepping motion, and people just couldn't read him. The opposing players just couldn't read him, and he could just weave and go so quick footed. You never knew which way he was going, and by heavens, he was about 7 stone soaking wet, and he could just leather a ball and it would fly 30 yards right to the top corner. He was unbelievable, and the injury that he got that finished his career, believe it or not, Steve, I was 2 yards away from him when it happened, and all it was a divot hole, and it was at Crystal Palace, Sellers Park, and as he was running back, we had been on the attack, we're running back, Crystal Palace had got the ball and they start to attack, and his ankle just turned in the divot hole, and I heard a noise. It was like a bullet being fired. It really was
tragic.
Oh, tragic. Absolutely. And he's such a lovely, lovely fella, really.
Before we finish then, as always, we're going to come up with a prediction for the game at the weekend. It's a tricky game. Every game
Norwich.
Norwich. How do you see that game going?
Do you know, I watched them against Liverpool, and I thought, Norwich, they didn't half play some football. They tried to out-football Liverpool, and you just knew that Liverpool were going to turn the tables on them for that. If Norwich are going to look to out-football sides, they're going to come a cropper against most of the top sides, that's for sure. But they might look at Newcastle and say, hey, we can out-football this lot. Well, Newcastle can play a bit, but also Newcastle, they can use heavy-handed tactics as well, probably better than Norwich can handle them. And so I'm being a bit heavy-handed in the way that I set up the side to go and play, and look to be physically on top of Norwich all the while. And if you can start to wear them down somewhat, then you can start to attack. But Norwich, they can play a little bit. So Newcastle, they've got to be on their toes at the back, in the middle, and if they get opportunities up front, they've got to stick them in the net. They really must. You can't afford to let 4 opportunities go like they did last Sunday against Arsenal. So against Norwich, I think that Newcastle, they've got to be the heavy mob and look to be the physically stronger side, and then they can go and play their football. Don't start right from the very beginning wanting to tippy tap all the way through. I don't think it'll work. Be the stronger, harder, nastier side.
Prediction?
I think having lost to Arsenal 1-0, Newcastle have got to look at Norwich. The very least is a draw, but they should go looking for a win, because I think that Newcastle, they've got to say to themselves, and I think this is a lesson from Rafa, that there are games that you're going to lose, and they're Arsenal, Man City, Man United. You know the list. The other list are the games that you can win, and you've got to go all out for them. And I think that Steve Bruce hopefully will pass on the same message. That a lot of the players from the Rafa Benitez days, they've got it inside of them. I'm going to take Newcastle to win, and I think they could, if they really went about it properly, they could win quite handsomely. But they've got to be careful of the football that Norwich play.
My heart says a 1-1 draw. I can see Newcastle.
We never agree.
I can see Newcastle losing 2-1 though at the weekend. So my prediction is going to be a 2-1 defeat.
Right.
Again, I went for the 2-1 last week. I'm going to go for 2-1 again this week. Malcolm, pleasure as always, and look forward to chewing the fat with you on Newcastle United again next week. You can follow us, of course, on Facebook and on Twitter, and subscribe to us. Please subscribe to the YouTube channel. We're going to play out this week with local band The Good Souls, who've sent in their video. If you're a local band and you want some publicity, send your video or your tunes to us at the show. Good night.
Good night.